Now, I don't want to teach you, I don't know how to suck eggs, but I want to show you just a couple of approaches that I use to, I guess, getting this whole thing organized. We're talking about an event that's got lots of different components, and we're not only are we talking about budget, we're talking about the practicalities of managing staff, of managing timeline, all of that kind of stuff. So you've got the information there about Gantt charting, which is about timelining, but it's really important when you're doing community work to keep on track of, keep a track of everything that's going on. Now, this is an approach that I've used quite a bit. I'm going to show you how to do some simple things with Word, just on the off chance that you don't know, but please feel free to fast forward. So I'm just going to share my screen, and we will get stuck into it. All right, so this is kind of stating the obvious. When you're creating an event, what you'll find is that it's, look, it just becomes bigger than Ben-Hur. So the first thing I do is change it to A3. And then flip it on its side. Right, this just makes your life a little bit easier. Now, this process of creating effectively what I would call a project document is very much, look, you'll change it all the way through, but this is the approach that I use, and you just change it to fit your needs. So create a bit of a table that's got a whole bunch of ideas across the top, a whole bunch of spaces. And what you're trying to do is break down your project into a number of sections, but also provide the details that you need. So think about what information is it going to require that if I drop dead, I don't know if you're going to drop dead, but if you drop dead, can someone else pick this up and kind of run with it? Okay, and that's really important. So if we think about, I'm going to go back to a festival. So if we think about a festival now, we might have entertainment. Now you'll note that that's a really, really broad kind of idea, and that's very intentional. We've also got this idea of food. Now you could put it in the same category, but what you're trying to do is create a series of sections that make sense to you. Maybe we'll call this logistics. No, we'll call it site equipment. So this is going to include things like shade and tents and water and all that kind of stuff. You get the idea. So think about your project, break it up into lots of sections. This, you can constantly expand it and move things around. And often that will happen is that you'll put it into, you put something into the entertainment and then you realize, hold on a minute, that's actually equipment. So then in the next section, we're going to get a little more detail. So we're going to go band 1. So we've got a number of bands. So you know ahead of time that you're going to have 2 bands. You also know that you've got an MC. So again, we're breaking it up. We're not to the task bit yet. When we're thinking about food, we're talking about food bands. Now this one might just be a matter of arranging them. So we'll just call it by 3 because that's kind of one job rather than 3. Site equipment, we'll call this sound gear. What else? Marquees, chairs, tables. Now, remembering that organising something in a community setting is actually quite different to organising it commercially. When you organise things commercially, basically all of this gear you just send off to the local hire place. They send the list off to the local hire place, get them to deliver it and set it up. Now, often in community, you're drawing things from all around the place. And I know I've spoken about the trade-off between getting things for free and the time that it costs you, and that's important to remember. But part of this is allowing you to go, okay, well, we're going to get marquees from Bob and chairs from the local church. So we've got these different areas. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to, and you can put this in any order and you'll end up shifting them around, but I would always, I'm keen to understand my costs. So commercial costs or estimated costs. So often I would call this estimated costs. What this does is is you can use, you can just get a sense on the internet as to how much things are going to cost you and then try and work it down. And then actual costs. Really important to keep a track of your costs. So off the top of my head, I might say, look, we're not going to go for anything massive. We're going to go for a couple of bands that are 500. That's actually really cheap for a band. An MC, what we're going to do is we're going to put in 200, but we're going to try and get him for free. Okay, food vans should be nil, but you should always overestimate what it's going to cost you. So sound gear, I'm pretty sure we can get it for $300, but I'm going to put it at 400. marquees are going to cost us a bit of money, and you would actually do the research and find out what this costs. Now, providing this benchmark before you start making phone calls allows you to understand where you're working from. So if you find that you can hire your chairs and tables for $100, then it's hardly worth getting a favor. Okay, so working out what your benchmark cost is actually really good for your decision making around a project. Obviously, actual costs, you know, once you decide, yep, we're going to get this commercially, and you get the invoice, you pop your actual cost in there to keep track of it. Again, make sure that you spend money in a way that is helping you achieve your goals. Don't spend all of your money on the thing that's kind of nice to have, a fairy floss machine, when in actual fact it doesn't align with your objectives. Okay, so you want to spend money where it's going to pay off. Okay, now this contact details. So this really is about how, you know, who I need to talk to. Now, you won't fill in every single one of these columns, but knowing where we're going to get these from is really important. The other thing that I would get in here is just to start sorting out your to-do list. Okay, now obviously for each of these items, you're going to have multiple things. So for the band, band one, we might be call the promoter. You might also have in there talk to committee about shortlisting, decide what type of band. So really all of this work can be done when you're at home on your computer before you really start kind of mapping this stuff out. Decide what type of music. Okay. Food bands, it might be choose types, book vans, and then all the way through to the day. So reminder phone call. Okay. Now this stuff may or may not end up in your Gantt chart, reminder phone call, but I would recommend whenever you're doing community work that you come up with some really good excuse a week before the event to give just about everybody that's involved a call and say, hey, is there anything you need from me for next week? And you'll be surprised how often some of them go, oh my goodness, I forgot about that. Thank you for making the call. So plan a reason to call because you're often relying on volunteers. So, you know, come up with a good excuse to call, you know, the week before so that you don't get shot in the foot. So basically work through and create a to-do list. Now, when you first do this is going to be rough. It's going to have gaps all through it, but you need to keep revisiting it and crossing things out and adding new things so that you're continuing to work on things. Notes can also be really useful. The reason I find this useful is because I go here and I'm talking to someone about this festival and they say, did you know that the local church has sound gear? Talk to Jack, okay? And this gives me something to follow up and then I would get a phone number in there, right? And this becomes really useful. The other thing that you want to do is status, okay? Now, this is a working document. It's not finished until you're finished, right? So what I would actually do as I create these, I like using colors. So what you'll end up with is a list that's bigger than Ben-Hur. It's actually quite frightening to realize how many things you need to do when you're organizing a project. But what you can do, and what I find helpful, is to go, okay, so I'm gonna prioritize some things. So I'm gonna go through today, I'm gonna spend some time, I'm gonna talk to the committee. I'm also going to book the vans and choose the types, okay? But I might also contact and so I've got local church, and so I might add in here, contact Jack from church. So then every time I come to do some work, what I'm trying to do is deal with these things. Now, once they're dealt with, once I've called them, obviously that's going to create another action item. So contact Jack from church and then go, you know, then we might go, yep, booked. Okay, so we've arranged it, but we also need to make a reminder call. No, it's formatted wrong. Now, you can adjust this approach endlessly, but what you're trying to do is create a rolling to-do list. You know, you're trying to keep track of everything and create a rolling to-do list. So you might find that you end up with a couple of extra columns depending on what you're doing. And you might also end up often what I end up doing is dividing this and just having one page for entertainment, one page for food. The other thing that can be really useful is to have responsible. So depending on the size of your event, you might be responsible for everything. I've done plenty of events where I was responsible for everything. But if you're not, then you might find that you want to have a responsible category. Committee chair. And then your tasks as you work through this actually become to follow up the committee chair, okay, or follow up Jane. So I find this approach really, really, really helpful. And it also is the kind of thing that when you do something on an annual basis or you do it again, you go back and you start with this document, because this document actually maps out exactly what you need to do. So you might have a better approach. Don't get me wrong. This is the approach that I've used to create community festivals, art exhibitions, music events, other big projects, you know. And I found it really helpful. And so give it a go, see how you go. But the most important thing is to break your project down to the finest of fine details. Don't assume that you're going to remember anything, okay? Assume that you're going to forget. So things like make reminder call at the end, check such and such, get them all on the list. Just again, that's a process that you go through really, really, really slowly and go, okay, if I do all of those things, will I have food on the day? Definitely, okay? And then you'll keep adding to it all the way till the final day, the day of the event. Hope that's been useful. Go and create a table, give it a go. If you struggle with Word, Google it, okay? It's my answer to everything, just Google it. There are instructions on how to do tables. There's instructions on how to change the page size or how to change the direction of the page. Don't let that hold you back. Learn some new skills. Catch you later.